He does the paracycling. No, is that what it's called? Hand cycling, yeah. And he's paralyzed from the waist down, and that's a whole nother incredible story of that. He went to the Invictus Games that Prince Andrew started, won gold medals there in cycling, and the other ones too. He's been in. He's like at the top of his field, and it's just he came to our very first Easter service. You remember, Bill? Yeah. Our very first Easter service, and it was locked up because it was really early in the morning, and we had just started doing this, and so the doors were locked, and there was no trail to get back to the amphitheater, and he was just learning how to operate in his wheelchair. So it wasn't long after everything had happened, and it was just, that nervousness you feel when and he's going through there, gravel by gravel and rock by rock, getting his wheelchair over to that part. And then when I had a radio program, I had Brian on the program, we were talking about some stuff, and when I mentioned something about a path, and I said, remember when you were, and he goes, yep, and he says, Uncle, he says, there's never a path. You have to make one all the time. Yeah. He says, and that's the way it always was, I just didn't realize it until it became literal. I thought, man, if that's not a metaphor for what's going on here, I teach about the path of uncertainty. That the natural way to go would be to pick the path of certainty, but the spiritual way is to take the path of uncertainty, where we can't necessarily see outcomes, where we have no idea what's going to happen. We could go back and look at these things that happened in our life and not ever be able to look back and go, I still don't know how I got here. I connect the dots, but the dots may go like this. Yeah. But somehow I gave God something to work with. Years ago, I met a friend of mine that I didn't know I had, who I knew her dad when I was with the Sons organization, went to Italy, and he was our scout, or our guide, when we went to Italy to do games in Italy, and Dick Percadani. And I met his daughter Louisa, and she became a friend of mine, and we used to sit unemployed over at Starbucks day after day and hours and just dream and share and try to talk ourselves up, and things are going to get better, and that experience. You do that, you can do that for a long time, and we're not talking about months, we're talking years. She watched me go through that dreaming of, I believe there's a community for me, I just don't know where it is, and I don't want to pastor some of these churches because I don't agree with most of what they say, what's going to happen. And over the years, we saw our lives kind of like evolve out of the dreaming and the hoping, but also the restlessness of trusting and not being able to predict what's going to happen. When we let go of control, we don't let go of control, really. We're letting go of the illusions that we thought we were in control. And we're beginning to think for the first time outside of our limited understanding or our minimal options, either this or that. And looking back at that now, Louisa was here when we started a year ago on Easter. On the first one here, and beyond that, when a year before or 2 years, when we did a sunrise service, and just kind of I'd wander through here, I'd take a hike, wander through and dream. And I've never believed that what I visualized would be what I'm seeing this morning. Wow. Over the years. Never. And it was pre me working at Calvary Healing Center. It was pre any of that. And every move came with fear and awkwardness, because anything you really, really want, you're going to get scared about. So you just got to know that. Every person that truly wants to accomplish a dream they had, or they want to be in recovery, or they get scared if it's really important to them. We're like, why am I so scared? You're scared because it's important to you. But you have to be able to trust and believe that something's getting created out of nothing, and that what you have is enough for God to work with. And now Louisa is here. She surprised me this morning, and she's going to Hawaii to work. Who'd have thought that, sitting in Starbucks going, how are we going to pay for this donut, Who would have thought, and when we allow the mystery that we call God to show up in our familiar and random circumstances, now we're on to something. There's two things that it takes for us to begin to work and accomplish the things we couldn't imagine. It's not my power and God's tolerance in me wanting to do it. It's not the Mexican blessing that I used to get from my mom sometimes when I pestered her and pestered her and pestered her to go somewhere and she couldn't make a decision on whether I should go or not. And I go, but Mom, they're coming over right now. And I get what I call the Mexican blessing. I go. It wasn't exactly the biggest blessing in the world, you know. It was more like, go. You can't have my blessing, but you can go. And you always felt like, is this okay for me? You know, and we live our lives like that, like we've gotten the Mexican blessing that's go. You don't have my blessing, but just go. And that's the way we treat the good things in life that come our way. We don't know how to receive. I bet you there's more really poor receivers in here than there are givers. I bet you people in here want to be able to give, and they're waiting for the day that they can give. One of these days, I want to be on that side of things, and I want to give, and I want to give. You will never be a great giver until you learn your inadequacy and your insufficiency in your inability to give, and that's not required, but you just sit in the restlessness of having to receive without anything you could do back. That is the indiscriminate love of God. That is the nature of God's love. And that kind of somewhat brings me into what I want to talk about today, which is one of two things, and both ideas seemed equally important, and so I didn't know where to go, so you have two sermon titles. The sacredness of Alfred Hitchcock moments and being the object of God's delight. And if this were Food Network, it's like God gave me two items that don't go together, and I'll make something out of it, dude. So hopefully they're going to kind of weave together, or I might do a third thing. I don't know. But that's the nature of the wild goose in this. We just kind of roll with it and see where God is going in this aspect of it. We're going to finish up on this book here, the last Sunday that we talked a little bit, kind of way off to the side of it, but as a launching point, the Ragamuffin Gospel that we've been talking about over the last several weeks. And wrap it up, I want to read to you something that he says as in the final page. Brennan Manning. The greatest gift any ragamuffin, and a ragamuffin is that person who feels beat up, bedraggled, worn out, incapable, insufficient, and finally comes to a place that they have letting go of the expectations that they were supposed to be efficient, adequate, and enough. The greatest gift any ragamuffin can receive from Jesus is the Abba experience. Abba meaning daddy. Jesus says we are to go to God with the unaffected simplicity of a child with his daddy. In a poignant psalm expressing childlike trust in God, David says, "Enough for me to keep my soul tranquil and quiet like a child in its mother's arms, as content as a child that has been weaned." The little one is not an infant, but a weaned youngster of 2 or 3 who has been toddling around exploring the mysteries of his father's flashlight, his keychain, and assorted coins left on an end table. The little ragamuffin suddenly wearies and staggers back into his mother's arms. Soothed by her affectionate words as she strokes his hair, the little guy falls asleep tranquil and quiet. Jesus invites us to become like a little child, to crawl into Abba's arms and let him love on us. And this is the line I want you to hear. Though, as Alan Jones notes, the most difficult part of mature faith, the most difficult part of mature faith is to allow ourselves to be the object of God's delight. That's what it means to receive the indiscriminate love of God. To be a receiver instead of a giver. When we're giving, we have power. When we're giving, we have power. And by the way, I want to make a little mention about the children, because I know that can be distraction sometimes. I want to teach you a way to meditate. Okay? We always are fighting against racing thoughts, interferences, air conditioners going on. We're always bothered by not having the right temperature in the room. All of those things. When we try to force those things out or away or think they need to be removed in order for me to be okay or to be able to, then we are missing the whole point of peace during chaos. We're missing the point of inclusivity. So what you practice is allowing it to be part of what's going on. Almost acknowledging that instead of making it go away. When I can do that, I can learn to allow those suffering moments and those things that go on in my life, and I allow them in. Let it be a part of. Even just talking about it creates a calming sense that everything is included. And that's why Jesus said, let the children come to me. See, the children in that population, in that culture, were a nuisance. They were in the way. Especially if they were born the wrong gender in their eyes. Let's send them away. And Jesus did a phenomenal thing. He said, you know what, let them come to me. It's like, dude, we have important things to talk about. And that's when he's able to say, unless you come as a child, indiscriminately and passionately, and race into the Father's arms, you will never be worthy of the kingdom of God. Whew. Right? So we will include. And we let parents figure out the problems that are there. We let other people figure that out. Because you know what? We ain't going to hire a children's director. We're not going to hire a daycare director. We're going to have a loving community that says, you know what? We'll figure it out. But until then, they belong as that happens. And so I hope, it's kind of a radical, I think, kind of a way to go about it. But I think it's an organic style that this community of the Wild Goose has been all about. What if we get more people? Send some away? No, we moved over to this room. We moved over to this room. What if nobody volunteers to whatever? Never had that problem. All of a sudden people start to step up. You know, one of the things that when we first started, that Mike Speakman, who started PAL, and PAL started very similarly to us, when I was getting all full of myself and worried and what am I going to do and what am I going to say and what if I get booed one Sunday morning and that kind of thing. One of the things he said to me is, he says, Henry, you're not starting anything. And I'm like, yeah, I am. He goes, no, you're not. He goes, you're just stepping into what God is already doing. That's what we're doing in the life we want. You're just stepping into what God is already doing. Okay, got off on a third message. It's getting complicated. Faith, the mature faith is to allow ourselves to be the object of God's delight. You know, when our spiritual life really begins to move into a direction we didn't expect is when we embrace the tension that's caused in our life. Usually in the tense moments, in the tensiest times, we want to try to, divert whatever energy is going away we don't want it to, and we try to manipulate and coerce and ignore or deny or go into isolation. And yet these tension moments in our life happen a lot. Yeah, I came home one day and my sister was watching an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Talk about tension. The Birds. And I walked in, and I was, by the way, really disappointed one time when kids I thought was going to be a scary movie for them to watch, because it was for me, and they sat watching The Birds like this. I was so disappointed. I'm like, what freaking scares you guys now? Seriously, that worried me a lot. But anyway, I walk in, and Frankie's on the couch watching The Birds, all right? And it's when the lady's going up the steps. And that room, somebody already said, ah! The room is full of the birds, and she's talking to the TV. And she's like, don't go there! Don't go there! She's seen it before. I knew when we saw it when we were young, She's like, don't go there! Why is she going there? Why do people go there when they know that they shouldn't go there? And That's what we do, though. We don't listen to that voice on the other side of the TV yelling at us to not go there. Our curiosity gets the best of us. We think falling into the very thing we fear the most, if it just consumes us, we'll be better off. Because we're afraid of the tension. We're so fearful of the tension. But see, when you have a relationship with the mystery that we call God, and you come to those tense moments, it's kind of like when Jesus was telling the disciples to feed the 5,000 when they had no food. There's a tense moment. We can't. He's like, right. Good answer. I'm glad you didn't try to fake your way through this. Feed invisible food or something. And look at me for one of these. Because I'm not going to join you in your denial. All we can do is come back and say, I can't. All we can do is say, I can't. And in that, you know what we could do too is we can open the doors so that she can, oh, she's gone. Because that sometimes, if we leave them open and they can, I don't know. So, that's such a hard one. It's so hard to know how to navigate through that, you know? Moms are going, seriously? You're telling me that? Seriously, Henry? Okay. It's easy as a grandfather now. I'm so peaceful, right? So awesome as a grandfather. So in that moment of feeling inadequate, they had to turn their inadequacy over to God and say, I can't. He's like, okay, what do you have? 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. All right, then give that to me. What do you have? Perfect. See, what is inadequate in our hands is plenty for God to work with. So here's that tense moment. Well, they have another moment, and that's when the disciples, this is after his crucifixion, and in that crucifixion, check this out. So he says, it says, after these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and he manifested himself in this way. Simon Peter, what was Simon Peter? Okay, we think of him as a disciple, follower, apostle. Okay, he was the denier. Okay, wimpy human being. Denier. 3 times. He relapsed 3 times on his denial. Thomas called Didymus. I like that name, Didymus. Both means twins, by the way. He was a doubter. So we have a denier and a doubter. And then we have Nathanael of Cana. And Nathanael was also known as Bartholomew in other parts of the Bible. And because they changed their names, and God's like, you can run, but you can't hide. You can't change your name. No, they gave him 2 names. Nathanael of Cana, and he was the one who was a friend of Philip's, who Philip had brought to meet Jesus. And then Nathanael said, where's he from? And they said, Galilee. And he goes, does anything good come out of Galilee? So he was prejudiced. He was prejudiced. And then you got Zebedee. And Zebedee was James and John. Okay, and John was the one who was referred to himself. He had a big ego. He said he called himself the one that Jesus loved. And James, okay, these 2 brothers, Zebedee, their last name was Duda. And 2 others of his disciples were together. And so here's this group. Now remember when he called them, what were a lot of them doing when he called them and said, follow me? They were fishing, right? The Zebedee brothers were fishing with their father, okay? Their father was a master fisherman. That's what he did for a living, all right? And so Jesus is now going to appear to them. And Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we will also come. Remember, they think Jesus is dead and gone, possibly resurrected, but they don't know. We will also come with you. They went out and got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Look what this guy's doing. Jesus is doing. So Jesus said to them, children, you do not have any fish, do you? They answered him, no. And he said to them, cast the net on the right hand side of the boat, and you will find a catch. So they cast, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great number of fish. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, and this is written in John, so we know he's he's talking about himself. It is the Lord. So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put his outer garment on, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land. So they were almost close, but Peter's like, no! So Peter's swimming out to the shore. Poor Peter didn't want to make, he already denied him 3 times, okay? He didn't want to make any mistakes. I'm coming out! Coming right now! Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord. He put out his arm guard, went out there. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards away. They must have always said about Peter every time he did stuff like this, what an idiot. Seriously. He's like, Jesus is walking on the water. And he's like, can I play? He's like, sure, come on out. And Peter's like, dude, this is awesome, but I can't walk on water. Glug, glug, glug. Guys in the boat, what an idiot. The people that experience the tension and the scariness of walking with God, other people will be seen as foolish. How do you believe in something you can't see? What are you doing? Take responsibility. It's all in you. But when we trust the mystery we call God, there is a spiritual tension gets created. So Peter, this is the same Peter who's done this. He's now, because of all of his mistakes, all of his errors, all the things that God allowed him to experience, the intimacy, he's saying, I want more of that. Because I remember when I went down under the water, when I was doing it on my own power and my own will, and I remember that I felt the hand of God, the hand of Jesus pull me up out of the water. The guys in the boat, they were saying he's an idiot, never felt the hand of Jesus pull them out from under the water. I think you have. That's intimacy. Intimacy isn't obedience, stay in the boat, go over there, everything's cool. Oh, he's walking on the water. No, it's that passionate, my God. I nearly died there for a second. And I felt the hand pull me out. The tension. So when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire already laid and fish placed on it with bread. Is this really a story in the Bible? I mean, seriously. He's got a grill. He's grilling on the land. And these guys just picked up a load of fish and busted their net and their backs pulling it in. And the same dude who told them to go fish over there has his own fish and he's cooking. And he said to them, bring some of the fish which you have now caught. And Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of large fish, 153. And all there were so many, the net was torn. And he's like, how many you want, man? We needed this when we fed the 5,000. You could have done that when we were going to feed the 5,000. Why'd you have to pull that? And Jesus is like, because I love the tension. I love the tension. Because see, it's all going to work out right anyway when you trust me. It's just in the middle of it, you freak out. You think you're going to die. You think this is the end. But we can't be guided and defined by our circumstances anymore. We're in the spiritual life. And sometimes we don't have. Sometimes we feel inadequate. Sometimes we feel awkward and not in control. And then I love this line, and I seriously think this is one of the greatest scriptures in the Bible. Breakfast is my favorite meal. I will have it at every meal if possible. I love breakfast. And look what Jesus says. Come and have breakfast. I love it. Everybody wants to hear some dramatic word from the Lord. Thus saith he. I just want to hear, hey Henry, let's get breakfast. Oh my gosh. When I was doing some work in construction, when I was unemployed and I was working with John, my favorite part was when we were up at 3 o'clock in the morning and around 6, 7, hey guys, let's go get breakfast. Yeah! Breakfast. I love breakfast so much I chose breakfast over church. They did. We dropped the kids off and go have breakfast. I wish I'd have known this scripture back then. I'd have used this to support my habit. Jesus said, come have breakfast. His brother Denny. Come on. Denny was cooking breakfast. When we got there, they were cooking it already. Hey! None of the disciples ventured to question him, who are you, knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and the fish likewise. And this is now the third time that Jesus was manifested to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. The Spirit of God manifests himself to us in our tension, not in our stubbornness, in our unwillingness, in our resistance. He reveals himself in our tension when we're willing. And then he shows us that he's adequate and he's enough and he's sufficient. And he shows us that he wasn't disappointed when we felt guilty and ashamed. He shows us that that was our self. That was just our self getting in the way. Listen as I read this Brennan Manning quote on the back of your page. He's talking about Thomas Merton and why we experience what we experience with our false self. He says, living out of the false self, and remember the false self is that which we created from birth on to learn how to cope and deal with the tangible world. Okay? It's the occupations that we develop and the titles. It's the addiction to me running the show and creating myself. How oftentimes we say, I am this or I'm that. You know, and so that false self is what creates. It's living out of the false self creates a compulsive desire to present a perfect image to the public so that everybody will admire us and nobody will know us. Think about that. So that everybody will admire us, yet no one will know us. And yet what we want more than anything else is to be known. When you meet somebody who you thought was to be admired, and then you find out that they are just like you, and you see how genuine they are, and they boldly tell you that they're real people and that they fail, don't you all of a sudden love that you know them? Yeah, because knowing is more important than admiring. Knowing is better than admiring. And therefore we can admire somebody because we know them and they're authentic and they're genuine. Merton said, a life lived devoted to the shadow, false self, to the shadow is a life of sin. I have sinned in my cowardly refusal, out of fear of rejection, to think, feel, act, respond, and live by my authentic self. We even refuse to be our true self with God, and then wonder why we lack intimacy with God. Hatred, now, and this is important to note on the false self, the imposter in us that gets created. And the imposter can weave in and out of any moment. There's a wonderful book by Brennan Manning called Posers, Fakers, and Wannabes. And in the book, while he's writing and you're reading it, as he's writing it, he says right there, without excluding it from the book, okay, right then I was totally posing in what I was saying in that last paragraph. And I'm going to leave it there as an example of how quickly that can happen. I was acting like Brennan Manning, the author, instead of Brennan Manning, the knucklehead. And he goes right back into his writing, and I love that. Okay, so that imposter self is that false self. Hatred of the imposter self is actually self-hatred. So we don't want to be hating that false self. We make friends and we understand it. It has a name, and we recognize that part of us. We recognize that part of us that can get mad at the guy behind the deli counter at Sprouts because he told you to smile, right? Oh, I got to tell you a quick story about that. After I told that story last week about how I got upset with that dude at Sprouts for telling me to smile, right? And I was going to let him off the hook, and the morality cop resurfaced, which is one of my masks of the imposter. My sister and I were doing some secondhand store shopping, and we were in the St. Vincent. and we're looking around. I had a lamp in my hand that I was going to buy, and some lady comes by, and she goes like this. She goes, "Hey, why don't you smile?" And I did just like that. I was like, kind of like, seriously? And there was a part of me that was like, seriously, again? Like this? And I looked at her, and she looked at me with a smile. She had just come here for the first time last Sunday. And I was like, thank God I didn't react again. She's like, dude, you really have an issue. You don't listen to your own messages. It's like, what has it been, 2 hours? When you begin to not take yourself so seriously, you can kind of laugh at what you do as an imposter instead of self-condemning, and that's what he's saying. The imposter and I constitute one person. Okay? Contempt for the false self gives vent to hostility. Self-hatred, which manifests itself as general irritability. I love that line. Really? Couldn't it be more something like I haven't done, like murder? You know? No, general irritability is a symptom of this. Oh my gosh. An irritation at the same faults in others that we hate in ourselves. You know what? I hate it when people don't smile. It's probably why I hated it when he told me to smile. An irritation at the same faults in others that we hate in ourselves. Self-hatred always results in some form of self-destructive behavior. Whew. Self-hatred always results in some form of self-destructive behavior. Now, I have an assignment for you. Okay? As somebody who is now even still and will probably the rest of my life deal, if I allow a little authenticity to come out, and it's a little scary, but always deal with an eating disorder. I mean, food was a comfort thing after my dad died. Dad died at 4 when I was 4. Otherwise, he had kids before he was 4, and that wouldn't work out. He died when I was 4, and food became a very comforting thing. You know, and like I tell everybody, as a Hispanic man, tortilla is everything. Stack of tortillas every day. You can roll everything in a tortilla. You can roll anything. Now they call them wraps. Okay, no, they're burritos. Okay, don't call it a wrap. All right, it's a burrito. All right, no matter how you want to change it, it's a burrito. All right, even if you use whole wheat, it's a burrito. But you can wrap anything in a burrito, even your feelings. You wrap anything in there, and it's so convenient. You can carry it with you in the car, anywhere. It's so convenient, you know, and it's so comforting. So comforting. It's cold when you feel hot, and it can be hot when you feel cold. Food is great that way. As Janine Roth says, it doesn't talk back at you, it doesn't leave you. So perhaps it's a substitute for intimacy, as is drugs and alcohol and anything else. Toxic relationship. Intimacy with ourselves and intimacy with God. I started to think about that. So in this, I actually took the word food out of this line because I didn't want you to know that I was actually personalizing and working on it myself. So now I screwed it up. I told you that food used to be there. So if I can't be authentic, what can I expect out of you, right? Damn. Okay, so here's the line. When you believe in yourself more than you believe in, and you fill in the blank. When you believe in yourself more than you believe in my case food, when you believe in yourself more than you believe in food, you will stop using food as if it were your only chance at not falling apart. You get to fill in that blank. Just think about what that compulsion is. What is your compulsion? When you believe in yourself more than you believe in, you will stop using it as if it were your only chance at not falling apart. That is the ultimate of surrendering yourself to the tension that you feel inwardly and outside of you. And you give yourself to it, to understand it, without it becoming a compulsive behavior. We're on to something. We're on to something a little scary, you guys. But you know what? That's why we have a community that says, you know what, we'll do that together. And you find each other to do that together. Share that if you want to with somebody else. Think about it as we go on. Think about it as we come to the table where we are creating the empty space that was filled with our compulsion. Just for this moment, letting it go for 1 minute. You can take it back if you want to later, like I nearly did at the thrift store. Letting go of that compulsion just for this moment, the sacredness of this moment. When you have to admit that what you've been fishing with is torn at the bottom. That God already had fish He was cooking on the grill. He just wanted you to share yours so you were participating, but He could have done it on His own. When we look at those things in our life that have preoccupied our mind and they gave way to fear and anxiety, you know what? I have a feeling that the problems with anxiety and worry are simply because they've been there so long, they've lodged themselves in our body and our brain. And we need to have them dislodged permanently by the God who says, you're enough. You're enough. To the God who says, hey, come have breakfast. Come have breakfast. And we were like, yeah, but we're working on things. I'm 7 years old and I'm memorizing scriptures with Awana so I can get gold stars. And he goes, you know what? Awana. Tell him you know the one who wrote the book. Tell him you know who made the movie. You tell him it's not about what you do. It's not about what you do. It's about who you know. You're with me. Just like Eric going to Canton, Ohio because he knows somebody who can let him participate in the Hall of Fame. It's because of who he knows, not what he's done. In the same way, we have a God who calls us out of who we are and who He is. Who says, yeah, you can bring your false self because you can't detach from it. But I got news for you. Your false self will always survive because it doesn't need anything to keep it alive. You need life. So that you can see the false self and call it what it is when it starts coming around trying to run the show. How do I do that? I do that by allowing the brokenness that I experience to stop being patched up, mortared in, by trying to stop trying to fix it on my own. I stop trying to fix the sail when there's an ocean wave hitting and I think Jesus is sleeping when He should be awake. And I just lean in for further notice. For only one reason, is because He's saying, I want to hang out with you. I want to be with you in that tension. I want you to whisper to the spiritual voice that sits on the couch that says, don't go there. If I'd have known that, I would watch the whole movie still scared, but knowing it's going to end different as she drives off. And she's alive, but she has lots of wounds. Right? She'll never have a bird again. And Jesus said the tension of that moment is going to come soon, guys, and I'm going to be hung up on a cross, and you're going to hate what happens. But I'm going to tell you, it's merely a flesh wound. Because it's the false self. Enter into the deepest moments of spirituality that say I'm not governed by my appearance, my performance, my mistakes from last week, my near brush with danger by almost saying, seriously, you're going to tell me to smile again? And those moments resonate, and then all of a sudden you find yourself working on new things as that got accomplished and you and God together. This is a symbol of God saying, you are the object of my delight in your brokenness. So much so that I am broken with you and I join you in your brokenness instead of you having to become perfect. So every time you eat it, as a disclaimer, Jesus made all the grape juice in Safeway and in fries. This is not the other juice. This is grape cran. And it came out of his veins. It was weird. And he poured it in here. And he said, this is a symbol of my blood to tell you that I poured it out. I'm so all in with you. I'm so madly in love with you. You are the object of my delight. And I know you're going to be sad because we're not hanging out in the flesh, although that one time I'm going to grill some fish on the beach and you'll freak out, but then that's only for a couple times. Until then, you're going to start getting that through others. Every time you tell somebody else, hey, I grilled, come on over, it's almost like it's me and you all over again, so love one another. And share this meal together. And every time you do it, I want you to remember that my body was broken and my blood was poured out, not as a transaction, but as a transformation. To get our soulful self, our false self, to just be the shadow again and not get in the way and trip us up. Okay? So feel free to come to the table. Please stay in a silent mode. I'll put some music on. And during this time, there's also a book back there that Megan's provided for the diary of the community of the Wild Goose. If you had an epiphany moment or something that you want to share, just a word or a piece of gratitude that someday we'll be able to continue to accumulate, it's back there. And feel free to go in there and write on that while you're waiting to come up here. And we'll maintain the sacredness of this moment and become aware of our tension. Listen, if you've had tense moments, congratulations, it means you're alive. And you're sober, and you're connected to the God who loves you.